In this old version of Kerbal Space Program, I plan to show you how to build reusable rockets and a little bit of how to make the videos. So here I am building a reusable rocket. I just added a heat shield to the nose for second stage reusability because the engine will be in the way to have a heat shield on the back. I need enough fuel tank volume to get my second stage range. You see I added batteries and an antenna. I'm currently adding drag chutes. Second stage reusability relies on drag chutes sometimes to slow it down enough so that the main chutes can open. Now I'm adding main chutes, and you can see that I'm setting for a low altitude opening as I did with the drag chute, so that the parachutes are not ripped up when they pop out at high altitude at high velocity. One of the big deals about reusability is you have to have the first stage be automated, and to do that you have to make it into a probe. So let me add a coupling here and get a compartment to put a probe in. And since this is the only one in the early game, let me put this in here, and I invert it so that it actually can attach to something in there and not be stuck on my motor when I go for staging. I'm going to add some batteries in here, and I'm not going to create, just let the motor generate some electricity to recharge the batteries, but not going to add any solar because we don't have any solar this early in the game. I'm going to go a bit crazy here and make a very powerful first stage. To get my fuel tanks to fit together, to stick together in lower levels, what I do is I move the whole group of 5 tanks together here. And if I move them down together, that means they're all glued to each other. They don't disassemble when under high stress. You'll see that later in the video where some tanks tend to disassemble under high stress. Now this is way more than I need for a bottom stage. I'm going to add the swivel to the middle for control. But these other engines have a better ISP and actually weigh less than the swivels. Let me add some aerodynamic cones, aerodynamics to this rocket. And I like controllable fins. There's some neat things you can do with the drag if you have controllable fins when it is a single stage probe. You can actually put your you can do an empty test with just the bottom stage probe, and you take all the fuel out of it and do the center of gravity. Let me throw on a bunch of parachutes on the first stage. I suppose you could do the math and figure out how many you need for the weight of the rocket to get the descent you want, but I just kind of throw them on here. Now, one of the things I like to do is stage my parachutes so that they are activated before the second stage actually leaves. So I'll have the engine start and coupling that I'm putting on now actually happen after this batch of parachutes fires. They won't open until they get in down to their altitude, but they can be initiated while out in space. Okay, so that's ready to go. In the next scene, I actually left my screen capture on while I switched to a different game to show you a different rocket launch. This rocket has way too much weight on the top, and there's several other mistakes that are made with it, and we're going to see how it flies. But you can see on my screen that I have a Kerble video editing software on the middle far left, and that I'm using the Kerble motion transfer here. So let me jump ahead while this. I'm noticing this rocket is performing badly, so let me check and see if all the engines are running. This has too many fuel tanks, weighs too much, and too much of a top stage. So when the rocket separates, it's going to be at too low of altitude and speed to give me enough coast time so that I can get my second stage into orbit. You have to go all the way to orbit with the second stage. Otherwise, when you go back to parachute the first stage to the ground, it doesn't make it. Let me show you here. These are the track of the two different stages. The upper stage is accelerating very, very slowly because of its large amount of fuel compared to its power. Its power to weight ratio is very poor. To get a poor performing upper stage into orbit takes time, and you have to have a good, strong boost to give your second stage a chance to get to orbit before the booster crashes into the ocean. Let's jump ahead and watch that happen. Okay, you can see the altitude barely increasing here, and you can see the probe just fell in there. Boom, it's gone. Okay. Let's launch something really big. This is an asteroid miner, and it's fully reusable. At least the bottom stage is. Let's jump ahead to where it's flying hypersonic and ready to stage. You notice there's a lot of fuel left in this and a lot of delta V. I'm going to shut the engines off early and save some of that delta V so I can pick where it lands. You can hear the engine shut down right there, and let me change the view so we can look at the separation here. I have no throttles on, so when it separates it won't go anywhere. Now I'll throttle up and then adjust my heading to leave the ship with a round orbit. And so this stage I have to put into orbit before the other stage coasts back to the Earth. But it's a very low powered ship, very heavy ship. So it's going to take a whole long time to get into orbit. You can see how far the first stage brought me. It's clear into that bay over there. So we're going to accelerate slowly, slowly, slowly until we get into complete orbit. When we haven't moved far from the ship, we can toggle over to the booster and watch it fall away. There it is. And we can see how much delta V we've got on board. And actually we could do a little thrust if we wanted to right now. But let's go back to the ship and fast forward it until I'm in near orbit so that we can watch the periaps, I think is what it's called, get close to get over 70, so that defines us as orbiting. 70,000 meters. 40, 50, 60, 75. Okay, power off. Switch to. Now we're watching the booster descend. There it is. I generally fast forward it here. Let's put it in retrograde. Now this one has a large reaction wheel under the nose cones, so we can it rotates while it's up in space. It's got a really good altitude now, so it's just moving under reaction wheel power. I'm going to do a small boost back to miss this peninsula here, and you'll see the there you go. And watch the altitude change. Watch. Okay, see that? So now I'm going to land upstream of the peninsula. I've actually got too much fuel on board, so let me do some retrograde burns to slow this thing right down and have a little fun with it. I suppose if you were real good, you could reaction land something like this, but I'm just not that good. And notice that the fins are acting in reverse. And what will happen is they're trying to keep the rocket stable, but they don't know they're going backward. So trying to keep it from spinning, they're all turned in the direction and they make it spin. Having it pointed retrograde, having selected retrograde, and having these fins choose the opposite direction actually helps it tumble and slow down, which is a good thing to do. Right now I'm pushing, manually pushing, it's probably the S button, to use the fins to guide it, to fly it like an airplane. I just had all my parachutes pop out, so we're not going to be doing any more flying here. But that's another way to slow this huge thing down, is by flying it. So that's kind of fun to do. Now, the reason that I have so many parachutes on this one side of this is this thing's so big, it'll explode when it falls over. So to prevent this, I want it to hit the water at an angle, and you can see, well, it's at a slight angle. So when it hits the water, you see how it's slightly off center there. When it hits the water, it'll fall over to the left, and it will let the nose down easily to keep from destroying the whole upper part of the rocket at the impact. And now I can recover it and get all the money back for all those rocket engines and everything. How wonderful. When we recover the rocket, we get the financial credit and everything for the boosters and stuff, but we have to go back to the observatory, the tracking station, to find our orbiting ship and get on board again. Yep, it's this one. Nope. Okay, there we go. That one. Fly. And now we can continue our mission with this. I hope you found what you were looking for in my video. I like making them, but it would be nice if people actually liked them. So if you liked it, pass it on. Thank you. That's the world according to Frank. See you later.